Hello, everyone. You are about to hear a brief summary of the film Princess. Enjoy watching. A young princess woke up on the top floor of a tall tower with shackles on her hands. She doesn't remember much about what happened during the night, but she is determined to get out of there. Hearing footsteps, the girl pretended to be asleep. Two men entered the bedroom, one of whom wanted to touch her. The princess hit Arikesu on the head, then dislocated her finger to get rid of one of the shackles. She smashed the other man's face. He got angry and threw the princess to the floor. The girl took a hairpin out of her hair and stabbed the man in the eye with it until she reached his brain. The princess's long dress hindered her fighting. The second soldier hit the girl in the face. For this, he was stabbed with a hairpin and knocked down with shackles. His knee was broken with a log. Do you think you can get to the bottom? See you there. Another soldier came running at the noise. The princess beat him to death with a hammer and laid him in her bed. Now she had to find a way to get to the first floor. The girl looked out the window and saw the invaders forcing her family to their knees. The enemies locked the castle so that no one could escape. The son of a diplomat, Julius, is going to usurp power in the kingdom. In order to legitimize his right, the tyrant intends to marry the princess herself. He is helped by a female warrior named Mora. Julius is infuriated by the overly liberal king, who took in foreigners instead of capturing them by force. The princess realizes that she is to blame for everything. The day before, the girl was supposed to marry Julius, and he would have become the ruler after the king's death. However, at the last moment, the princess changed her mind and ran away. Suddenly, a burly man in a horned helmet entered the bathroom. While he was urinating, the girl hid under the water in the bathtub. The brute was in no hurry to leave the bathroom, which caused the princess to nearly drown. She tore off the hem of her dress and went out into the corridor. Unfortunately, the giant did not get far and grabbed the captive by the throat. Usually, it is effective to strike this creature. However, it is futile and may cause harm to oneself. The horned giant wields a long sword. Fortunately, he is slow to react. The girl takes advantage of this. Left without a sword, the bull used his horns. The princess jumped on the giant's shoulders, took off his helmet, and stabbed him in the neck with a horn. Thus, the bull was defeated. The girl had been taught kung fu since childhood by a migrant from China. Although the king opposed these trainings, the dead soldier was pulled out of the river. Julius suspects that there is a vigilante in the castle, so he ordered to check on the princess. The most athletic man was sent to the top of the tower with this task. The princess sat down to rest. She got rid of her skirt and sleeves, which prevented her from fighting. Two soldiers entered the room. The princess stabbed the first one with a broken stick and tied the second one to a beam with a rope. They refused to answer questions, so both had to be shot with a crossbow. The girl saw a crowd of soldiers running up the stairs, so she had to hang out of the window to remain unnoticed. It seemed that the danger had passed, but a fat man sat down to rest by the windowsill. Because of this, she had to hang over the precipice much longer. Enemy soldiers were looting and drinking in the throne room. The fugitive slipped past them unnoticed and entered her bedroom. She needed a special sword. Despite her father's prohibition, the girl continued to study martial arts. The princess was trained by Lin and her uncle Kai, the king's advisor. It was Kai who gave her this sword. The girl changed her shoes for boots and disappeared again into the secret passage for servants. The woman with the whip is not just a mercenary, but also Julius's mistress. The usurper is going to slit the old king's throat as soon as he ascends the throne. When the two began to cuddle, the princess tried to stab them through the wall. However, the villains were distracted. The heavyweight finally reached the top floor of the tower and looked into the bedroom. Everything seems to be fine. The princess is sleeping under guard. At this time, she made her way into the next room. The girl was frightened by the knight in golden armor, but it seems that it is just armor. This giant's sword was even bigger than Bikar's. He began to swing it, destroying everything around him. It was impossible to pierce the armor. It was too strong, however. The princess still found weak spots in the armpit and groin areas. The knight was wounded, but he continued to wield his sword. Then the princess smashed a jar of oil on him and set the giant on fire. At that moment, the fat man came down. "The princess is in the tower. Are you sure?" Julius ordered to check floor by floor and catch the killer at all costs. One of the military leaders attacked Julius's mistress. Without hesitation, she slit his throat with her whip. An entire army rushed into the tower. From above, the princess was attacked by aerial acrobats. They wounded the girl, for which 2 assassins lost their lives. With the first large group, the princess dealt with them using bushes, which she scattered across the floor. The crowd fell to the ground, and the girls simply ran across the shields. Tarzan was less fortunate. The princess cut him down, broke his leg, and hung him by it on a rope. The attackers were growing in number. The tenacious bruiser with a hammer continued to strangle the princess, even after she pierced him with her sword, so she had to pierce his head as well. Things got really tough after that. The princess was surrounded on all sides. The only thing that saved the girl was the order to capture her alive. Cornered, the girl jumped down onto one of the soldiers and landed 5 floors below. Only an acrobat would dare to repeat this stunt. At the same time, a half-dead fat man passed by, not noticing the princess. The fugitive was surrounded again, so the girl jumped out of the window, grabbing a pennant. Then she ran along the wall and flew into one of the attics. The princess is bleeding to death. She needs to hide and bandage her wounds. The girl remembered a conversation with her parents. The king had no sons to inherit the throne, so he was forced to marry his daughter to Julius. "The kingdom has no heir. We are vulnerable, but I can be the successor. You are my daughter." Her father hoped that the princess would find the strength to lie with Julius, but the girl thought otherwise. Lin entered the room. The Chinese woman had a special ointment for wounds. It would help the student recover quickly. The woman said that last night Julius had killed the entire royal guard. Only she and a couple of other people had managed to escape. They would get out through the drains, but they could only access them from the kitchen. A group of soldiers were rampaging there. They grabbed the cook and pinned her against the wall. Fortunately, there was someone to stand up for the girl. "Who are you?" "I am a princess, and this is Lin." Even cabbage did not help the invaders. The warrior girls kicked their enemies away and then gutted them. But then Moira entered the kitchen. With her whip, she dislocated Lin's shoulder and hung the princess from the ceiling. Somehow, the friends managed to fight back. Lin ordered the princess to escape through Toki. She would try to delay Moira. After bathing in the waste, the princess made her way to the dungeon where her family was being held. 3 drunks were responsible for guarding them. The girl also got drunk. The princess dealt with these jerks without any problems. Her father had no idea that his daughter was capable of cutting people down so cold-bloodedly. However, a second later, the princess was knocked out and she woke up in the throne room. Lin was also captured. Julius reached for her face and almost lost a finger. The usurper still intends to marry the princess. However, the girl promised that in that case, she would turn his life into a nightmare. The usurper did not like this prospect. Well, then he would execute the rebellious girl and take her younger sister Violet as his wife. Suddenly, the princess distracted everyone's attention. At that moment, Lin grabbed the younger sister and ran out of the hall. But our heroine was brutally thrown out of the window. The girl fell into the water from a great height. She sank like a stone, but healing flashbacks brought her back to her senses. The princess cut the rope, tore off a piece of glass, freed herself, and floated to the surface. Julius ordered a quick wedding ceremony, but first he needed to find his bride Violet. The princess was doing the same thing. She encountered another mini-boss on her way. However, this time Violet knocked him out, throwing her armor at the giant along with Lin. The 3 of them went down to the secret armory. While the soldiers were breaking into the castle, the warrior maidens donned leather armor. The princess armed herself with a sword, and Lin with a bow. It was too early for Violet to fight, so her main task was to hide well. Julius was already ready to torture the queen so that she would call her younger daughter, but then the sounds of a struggle came from the street. This princess refuses to die time and time again. Even the army is unable to stop her. Moreover, she is helped by Lin with her miracle bow, which can transform into swords. Violet couldn't sit still. She reached the prisoners and cut the rope on Kay's hands. The girls were surrounded by heavy knights. The experienced princess already knew that she had to strike at the joints. Julius finally found Violet. Now he was going to marry this young girl. The couple, like a mixer, swept through the enemy army and chopped them up with their swords. The last to go to the other world was the archer. Lin took care of the guards inside the castle. Her uncle came to her aid. Well, Moira is going to deal with the princess once and for all. As usual, she wields her whip. The king tried to take Julius's sword, but the villain knocked him out with a blow to the liver. During the fight, the princess lost her sword, but she was able to close the distance. She used Moira's weapon against her and broke the woman's neck with her whip. At the same time, Lin lost her battle. Julius seriously wounded the Chinese woman. Satisfied, Beard put on the crown and was now ready to fight his former fiancée. Your parents cried when you were born. They were so upset that you weren't a boy. Well, I heard that yours cried for the same reason. Julius proved to be a strong opponent, and a cunning one at that. He discreetly stabbed the princess in the leg with a dagger. The girl fought back with all her might until Julius knocked the sword out of her hands. The scoundrel forced the princess to her knees. Supposedly, she bowed before the new king. Julius intends to rule with force and fury. To prove it, he will execute the princess right now. Her severed head will terrify the rest. Suddenly, the king distracted Julius. The princess seized the moment and cut off the usurper's head herself. The king put the crown back on his head and announced that he no longer needed any sons-in-law or heirs. It would be better if, for the first time in history, a woman became the ruler, especially since she could single-handedly defeat an entire enemy army. A miraculous Chinese ointment got Lin back on her feet in a couple of minutes, and the woman was able to personally congratulate her student. And finally, Gerobaz completed his mission. He found the fugitive princess.